Hello and welcome to the Warcraft Academy Guide to Thok. This fight is very intense on damage and healing requirements and does act as a bit of a gear chuck compared with earlier fights. If you only want a summary of the fight, use the menu at the top to skip to the end, otherwise keep watching. There are two phases in this fight which he alternates between. In his first phase, the stack phase, he has a frontal breath called Fearsome Roar which should only ever hit your tank. It does damage and causes the tank to take 25% increased damage per stat, so your tanks need to move in and out to taunt off him as their stacks permit. He has a Tail Lash ability which does damage to anyone standing behind him, so never stand behind him. DPS have to stand on his sides to avoid these abilities. He also uses Shock Blast which does 100,000 nature damage to several random players, and his main ability here is Deafening Screech. He uses this whenever he gets to full energy, and it does physical damage to the entire raid and interrupts spellcasting for 2 seconds. Whenever you use this, you need to make sure that you aren't casting anything, so interrupt your cast before it finishes. The other thing is that every time he uses this, he gains a stacking buff called Acceleration, which increases the speed that his energy regenerates. So he'll use Deafening Screech more and more often until eventually he'll be casting it constantly. This makes it rather difficult to heal. However, you can counter this. Whenever a player in the fight gets below 50% health, they receive a debuff called Bloodied. If enough players with this debuff are within 10 yards of each other, Thok will transition into his second phase and all his stacks will disappear. On 10 man you need 5 players to be close with this debuff, and on 25 man you need 15 players. Now it can be tricky to pull this off. You need enough of your raid members to be below 50% to push him over, but you also need to be careful not to let anyone die. The idea here is to keep him in this phase for as long as you can safely keep everyone alive and then push him over. Around 12 stacks seems to be a good time to let him push, so you should stop raid healing around 9 and only heal those that drop too low to survive another hit. It's really important that you use raid cooldowns here to smooth out the damage. Spirit Link Totem especially is amazing for this, but all other damage reduction cooldowns will help, just don't use them all at once. Try to stagger them so that you can do it every phase, and remember to stay stacked. Once enough raiders are low, the frenzy phase will begin. In this phase, Thok will fixate on random raid members and move towards them for 12 seconds, and anyone that gets near his head will be instantly killed. After 12 seconds he'll pause for a moment and then fixate on someone else. During this phase, a Kor'kron Jailer will spawn which your tank should pick up. When killed, these drop a key which you can use to unlock one of the 3 interactable cages in the room, 1 on the left and 2 on the right. Once you pick a cage to unlock, a friendly NPC will come out and stand in front of the cage. A few seconds later, Thok will turn and move towards this NPC and eat it. Once this happens, the frenzy phase ends and the stack phase restarts. During the frenzy phase, you need to kite Thok in a way that keeps your raids safe. Ideally, when this phase begins, whoever is fixated will run immediately towards the entrance, and the rest of your raid can move in the opposite direction. From then on, whoever is fixated should move to the side of the room that your raid is not on, so if your raid is on the left side, Thok should be kited in a line from the entrance to the far wall on the right side. Things usually don't go as smoothly as this, so just generally kite away from your raid, and anyone else caught in the crossfire should try to run the other way. The most important thing here is to have one side of the room for kiting and one for the raid, and avoid his head. When the phase ends, your raiders should immediately stack on the boss's side again, and then you can resume the first phase again. Now, each time Thok eats an NPC and goes back into the first phase, he gains some new abilities. These abilities are basically identical to his original abilities, but with a couple of differences. After eating Akalik, who's in the cage on the left and should be the first NPC you free, he replaces his frontal cone attack with Acid Breath, which does nature damage instead of physical damage and reduces armor with each stack. Corrosive Blood replaces Shock Blast, which is just random nature damage dealt to the raid, and then a nature dot over 30 seconds. These abilities don't change anything with how you handle the phase. After eating Water Speaker Gorai, his breath attack becomes Freezing Breath, which does frost damage and freezes the tank in ice if he gets to 5 stacks. He'll use Icy Blood as random damage on the raid, and this leaves a stacking frost debuff on players hit. If they get to 5 stacks, they're frozen in a block of ice which must be killed. This is completely random RNG and again doesn't really alter how the phase works. The final NPC he eats is War Master Montak, who's in the back right cage, and this will be during your 3rd frenzy phase. After eating him, he gains Scorching Breath, which makes his breath deal fire damage and additional fire damage every 2 seconds. His other ability, Burning Blood, does damage to random raid members and leaves a puddle of flame underneath him that does damage when stood in. These abilities actually do change how the fight works a bit because the room is going to be basically covered with pools of fire during this last stack phase. There are basically two ways you can handle this phase. Either you can spread out around the room, avoiding the pools of fire and burning him down. This means you'll have to avoid fire damage, but you won't be able to push him into frenzy and it'll be hard to raid heal effectively. The other way is to stack up in melee like always and chain all your remaining raid and healing cooldowns until he's dead. The fire damage is actually not very high, so it's not too hard to heal through this. If he does go into frenzy, you can just spread out, kite and nuke him until dead. This is the soft enrage part of the fight, and he needs to be around 20% or under when you start the fire phase or you'll have trouble killing him in time. You can either Bloodlust here or at the very start of the fight. Bloodlust at the start ensures you have all your procs up, but Bloodlusting here will make it easier to heal through, and you also gain an extra damage proc in this phase, which may make it more beneficial for DPS. So, to sum up, stack up on the boss's side and have your tanks alternate tanking and running in and out. Don't get interrupted by a screech and try to heal through it until around 12 stacks. Use damage reduction cooldowns to smooth the damage from 8 stacks onwards. In the frenzy phase, have whoever is fixated run towards the entrance and then kite in between opposite ends of the room on one side. Don't let anyone get in front of his mouth. Kill the jailer and open the NPC cages to go back to the first phase. Repeat this 3 times. When you free the final NPC and start the final burn phase, start chaining healing and raid cooldowns until the boss dies. Thank you very much for watching this guide, and if you have any comments or suggestions, please post them in the comment section below, and remember to visit warcraftacademy.com for all of our other guides for Siege of Orgrimmar. If you like this guide, please do subscribe, it really helps me out a lot, I really appreciate it. Thank you and catch you soon.